Everyone, welcome to the Reasonable Person Podcast. I believe this is episode 19. Am I right, Brian?
That's what I have down and labeled it as. So it's episode
Okay.
19.
Yeah, this is episode 19 of the Reasonable Person Podcast. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm one of your co-hosts. Joining me today are the other two regular co-hosts, Brian D. Almeida and Kat Ainsworth. Also joining us tonight, special guest Alex Ooley. When we want to talk legal stuff, Alex is our big gun to bring in to talk about what it really means when these things go to court. Tonight's topic, normally we have a serious topic and then what I call a left turn. Uh, the left turn not being left politically, being going back to Bugs Bunny. I knew I should have made that left turn at Albuquerque. Uh, but the left turn is usually something fun. We haven't decided what that's going to be, so we'll get into that when we figure out what it's going to be. But the main topic tonight, Fourth Amendment, and specifically what I want to talk about tonight are the civil. I'm trying to come up with the words in my head. The
Civil asset forfeiture.
Yeah, of assets when regular people carrying cash get pulled over, or the police just say, well, that's a lot of money you're carrying. We think you're involved in drugs or trafficking or something else. We're going to take this, we're going to use it, and there's nothing you can do about it. Alex, civil forfeiture, this has been a bee in my bonnet for a long time. What are the rules around civil forfeiture? How much can you reasonably expect to carry in cash and not have the police say that's ours now?
Yeah. So civil asset forfeiture, frankly, is not a widely known concept by the general public. There are very few people you can stop just randomly and ask if they know what civil asset forfeiture is, and almost nobody can give you a good answer for what it is. And it's, frankly, it's difficult because it's so nonsensical. I think it's so, the way that it's utilized, at least, is so bizarre, and I think so unreasonable that most people wouldn't be happy to know that it exists if they knew. So I'll start out just by saying what is civil asset forfeiture for those who don't know. And it's really just a legal process here in the United States anyway, where law enforcement can seize and keep things like cash or vehicles or potentially real estate or other property if they suspect that it's connected to a criminal activity, even, and this is the key component, even if you are never charged or convicted of a crime. So if you're stopped and the officer searches your vehicle for whatever reason and discovers some amount of cash that they suspect is connected to a crime, they will sometimes seize that property and take it through the forfeiture process, and then it becomes your obligation or your burden to try to get it back. And that can often be very expensive to do, very burdensome, and often the cost to get it back exceeds the cost of the loss itself. So many people, especially for lower amounts, like amounts less than 10 grand, never pursue the money to try to get it back because it would cost more in attorney fees, et cetera, to try to get it back. Thankfully, there has been some progress, some reforms to this practice, at least at the state level in some places, to try to rein in this practice, because it's largely seen as policing for profit, at least the way it's practiced by some law enforcement agencies. And so thankfully, organizations like the Institute for Justice have made some headway in trying to reform this practice. But this practice goes back a long way. This really started with the Maritime Acts that the British utilized back before the founding, where they would seize property on ships coming into port, uh, just based on some alleged crime or non-payment of taxes, or some other alleged problem. So this is not something new. It's not a new practice in the United States, but it became much more prevalent in the 1980s when the drug war and the prosecution of the drug war became more heavily prosecuted and enforced. So, like I said, this is not new, but it has been, I think, problematic from a constitutional perspective, at least for the decades that it has been in place. And I can keep going, but if you want to stop me, or if you have any specific questions, I'll happily entertain those.
Well, it would seem to me that doing this direct, and I don't know, has it made it to the Supreme Court? Has civil asset forfeiture made it that far? Simply because it would seem to me that under the Fourth Amendment, that's my property. You cannot seize it without due process, and the due process is flipped on its head here.
Yeah, it has gone to the Supreme Court, but not as a general concept. So, as you know, the Supreme Court often decides cases based on narrow issues. And there was, in fact, a case out of Indiana where I happen to be from and where I practice. It's called the Timbs case, Timbs. And it actually went to the Supreme Court, not on the Fourth Amendment, but on the Eighth Amendment excessive fines clause, because Timbs, the defendant in a criminal case, was charged with a crime that had a maximum fine of $10,000, and the law enforcement department seized his Land Rover, which had a value of $42,000. And so the question was whether that violated the excessive fines clause. And the Supreme Court in Indiana said no. And for those who don't know, once there's a determination by the Supreme Court at the state level, you can, in some instances, appeal that to the Supreme Court of the United States, even though it's not a federal case. And in this situation, they did appeal to the United States Supreme Court. Thankfully, this United States Supreme Court took the case and overruled the state decision. So, based on the Eighth Amendment excessive fines clause, but it's never the issue of whether or not the civil asset forfeiture, just the practice as a broad stroke or in general, is constitution. That question has never reached the Supreme Court. So I'm hopeful that it does, or at least that the Supreme Court opines on ways that it at least might limit the practice in the scope that it's utilized. Because you're right, I think that it does implicate the Fourth Amendment. And what's unique about these is that these are cases against the property itself, not against the person, which is kind of strange. So it's what's called an in rem proceeding versus what's called an in personam proceeding. So that means in rem means it's a proceeding, a legal action against the property itself rather than against the person. And so a lot of times these cases are titled something like United States versus $120,000 in U.S. currency rather than U.S. versus Adam Smith. And so the theory is that the property itself does not have rights. And so therefore the Fourth Amendment is not implicated. Whereas you or I have a right to protection under the Fourth Amendment, the property itself does not. Which seems totally at odds with the plain language of the Fourth Amendment. But that's the way that it's utilized. Because what's the Fourth Amendment say, right? It says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. So it's the right of the people, not the right of the property, but it goes on to say, obviously, it's the right of the people to be secure in their property, essentially. So I don't see how you can rationalize a way to say that the civil asset forfeiture practice does not implicate the Fourth Amendment.
Well, I'm going to open this up. Brian, Kat, anything you want to bring into the discussion here?
I don't have anything additional. I mean, yeah, to me, it's a pretty clear violation of the guarantees of the Fourth Amendment, and I don't understand why the courts have continued to allow it to happen.
So I can get into a little more detail here if you'd like, because this is not just a problem with the Fourth Amendment or the Eighth Amendment, as I alluded to with the Tim's case. It's also a problem with the Fifth and 14th Amendment, the due process provisions of the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. So the way that these typically work, like I said, if you're at a roadside stop and they discover cash, there's this sort of presumption, because most people don't carry a lot of cash on their person or in their vehicles, that if you have $1,000, let's say, or $2,000, that you must be involved in some crime, because most people don't carry that much cash. Only drug dealers carry that much cash, or at least that's the sort of language that officers often use. And so they'll seize the property because they suspect that you're engaged in a crime, and then never charge you with a crime, or may never charge you with a crime. Because if all they have is the cash, let's face it, they're not going to be able to convict you of any sort of crime. So if they don't have any other evidence, if there are no drugs in the car, if there's no paraphernalia, if there's no other indication of drug use or engagement in the drug trade, they're not going to be able to convict you of a crime, but they'll still take the property. And so if they take that $2,500 or whatever the amount is, it's your burden to show at a hearing that it was not involved in a crime. You have to show that there's this burden shift. You have to show up and say, I had it for this legitimate purpose, and it was wrongfully seized. And most people, like I alluded to at the beginning, don't do that, especially if it's a lesser amount of money. So many people are either doing this pro se, if they're doing it at all. That means they're representing themselves in these cases. And others, if you hire an attorney, only get back the property itself, but are still out their attorney fees. So it has to be a substantial sum to make it worth the attorney fees. Now, there is some reform, and I believe it was under the Civil Asset Forfeiture Reform Act from the year 2000, I believe. I don't have it right in front of me. But if you substantially prevail in a case involving civil asset forfeiture, there are provisions that say that the government has to pay for your attorney fees, which is good, because that at least causes the law enforcement department some hesitancy in engaging in civil asset forfeiture if they think this person might prevail in getting it back, because not only are we not going to get the property that we seized, we're going to have to pay this person's attorney fees.
I don't think that goes far enough, though. There's one, and I apologize, Alex. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's okay.
There is a couple in Mississippi, truck drivers, that had sold their old semi truck. Were going to go buy a new one. Well, they were going to buy a newer used one, and they had $60,000, which is about enough for a down payment on a brand new one. But $60,000 will buy you a serviceable, workable used semi truck. They were on their way to buy it, got pulled over. Somehow or another, it got searched. The money got seized, and not only did they lose the money, they lost the opportunity to buy that vehicle. They were off the road for several months trying to get their money back. I don't think getting attorney's fees back is enough. I think that particular couple, they did eventually get their money back, but they ought to have been compensated for the months of work in their truck they lost.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree. And there are some instances where you might be able to sue a department or a particular officer if their actions were so egregious and so unreasonable that it could be seen as a civil rights violation. There may be some additional cause of action that you could bring, but those are difficult because of the qualified immunity thresholds and just the sort of general barriers to entry in federal court and civil rights cases. So those are very, very difficult, and many attorneys are reluctant to take them because they're difficult to win, and they take sometimes months, years to litigate with lots of expensive litigation and no guarantee of getting their investment or their money back through the litigation. So that's why I'm going to mention the Institute for Justice again. That's why institutions like the Institute for Justice, the Pacific Legal Foundation, are so great, because they are nonprofit organizations that operate based on the donations of their supporters and will take cases that many law firms are unable or unwilling to take. And they've made some great headway here. But oh, go ahead, Paul. Did you have something?
I'll go ahead and continue your thought process after that. I want to get to some comments after you're done.
So if you substantially prevail in one of these actions to get your property back, the department may be on the hook to pay your attorney fees. That's some benefit. The problem is, one of the tactics that they've used is that they will, if they think they're going to lose or that you will substantially prevail, they will simply dismiss the action, return the property and dismiss the action, so that there's no final judgment. There's no final order that you prevailed. So what they're doing is they're holding your property, they're making you litigate for it, and then if it looks like you're going to win, they'll dismiss it before there's a final judgment, so that it doesn't look like you substantially prevailed.
And then you have no basis to attempt to get any kind of recompense for being deprived of your property for that period of time, which is often going to be years.
That's right. No interest, no nothing, just the property itself that you get back. Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and pop a couple comments up here. Mead Hell Range says they allow it to happen because bureaucracy has become too large and the Fed has taken far more power than they were supposed to, and they want to continue expand that. I don't necessarily know that there's a power grab here. However, there are. I'm going to call out Florida specifically here. There are several areas in Florida where the police department is entirely funded by fines and civil asset forfeiture.
I thought civil asset forfeiture was mostly a local law enforcement rather than federal action.
Well, that's actually a great point, Brian, because there was, I believe it was in the early 1980s, maybe 1984. I might be able to find it here relatively quickly. But either way, in the 1980s, there was this equitable sharing that was created, where if local law enforcement helped the federal government engage in these civil asset forfeiture proceedings, they would share the property, the money usually that was forfeited. So there was incentive for local departments, local officers, to essentially do the bidding of federal government law enforcement, primarily for the enforcement of drug enforcement, but they would get the benefit of the property that was seized through this equitable sharing program. So I think most of it is at the state and local level, but even a lot of the federal civil asset forfeiture proceedings are at least initiated or assisted by state and local law enforcement.
Mark Hookham says, I used to keep $2,000 cash hidden in my car just in case I ran into a great gun deal. I could see that. I did when I was a much younger person before I got into Second Amendment rights. I used to keep $1,000 in case I found a used car I wanted to buy. Now, this is back in the 80s when you could buy a decent car for $1,000 used.
You're looking around for that mythical barn find.
I was looking for the Pinto that had the engine swap, is what I was looking for.
I can go for that.
I've got another example. Just this is actually a case that I'm familiar with personally, not one that I litigated, but one that was litigated by a friend of mine. A gentleman mailed $30,000 cash to his father, and when the cash arrived at the local airport terminal near his father, they have a team, the local department, the local police department, the city police department where the terminal is located, has a team of drug dogs that sniff packages all day long at the airport. And one of the dogs alerted on this particular package for whatever reason, and they seized the $30,000. There was no evidence of any drug possession. There were no drugs in the box. There was no evidence that either the father or the son were engaged in any illegal activity, but nevertheless, they seized the $30,000. My friend, who's also an attorney, helped litigate this case, and when he met with the son who sent the money, he told him this may cost 30 grand to litigate because it's going to take forever. They're going to fight this tooth and nail. And because they want the money, the local department wants that money. And so it's worth it to the local department to fight this for at least some period of time, because let's face it, they're not the ones paying the attorney fees. The taxpayers are for the local government agency. And the son said, I don't care. I want to fight this. This is wrong. And so they did. And there was some chance, obviously, that they could get the attorney fees. But ultimately, they settled the case. And I don't know exactly what the resolution was, but there was a settlement of some sort. So that's how you can see how nefarious of a practice this is, and how even where there's 30 grand involved, it's often not worth it to try to get it back.
I'm remembering a case in my head, and this is from a cracked memory cell. I mean, this may or may not. I could not pull the documentation right now to prove this happened, but my memory tells me there was a case where there was a large amount of cash, a dog alert, and it was a drug dog, and they tried to claim it was because of cocaine. And when it actually got tried, they went to a bank and withdrew a large amount of cash from the bank, and the cash from the bank alerted tested positive for cocaine.
Most cash that's been in circulation for very long has some trace amount of drug on it. I don't know percentage wise, but it's a significant amount of money that has trace levels of drugs on it.
Which doesn't make sense to me, that simply a dog alerting on a package that has cash in it would be sufficient justification. That's the kind of thing that, it flies in the face of common sense, frankly. I mean, that cash is often exposed, so a dog may alert on that. Doesn't mean that the transaction that is currently involved in, there's no other proof aside from that. I mean, it's pretty flimsy.
Yeah, and that's what's so problematic about this practice, is that they can take the money based on probable cause, or whatever the property is, the car or the cash, typically. And then in probable cause, and we talked about this in episode 4 when we talked about the Fourth Amendment more broadly, probable cause does not mean more likely than not. It's probable doesn't mean probable according to the courts. It just means there's some evidence that would lead a reasonable person to believe that a crime has been committed or may be committed. And so that's a pretty flimsy standard. There's a lot of gray area, a lot of interpretation there. And once the property has been seized, as I said, there's this burden shift. You have to go to court to get your property back because there's already been this probable cause determination, and that's a very low threshold. And oftentimes, a dog sniff is enough, or at least a substantial step toward a probable cause determination.
And there's no presumption of innocence because it's property as opposed to your person.
That's right.
Legally, it's divorced from you. Therefore, it's not subject to that assumption.
That's right. It's a civil proceeding. There is no presumption of innocence, and there is no proof beyond a reasonable doubt that's required because there is no criminal allegation many times.
Want to get a couple more comments in here. This one from George Gellery says, some folks care about what the government can do for them. I care about what the government can do to me. Yep. I like that one. Get this one in as well. Mead Hall Range again says, lacking any other actual probable cause or evidence of wrongdoing, it is none of the government's business how much money I have or what I am using it for.
Totally agree.
Let's see here. Let me scroll down because some of these comments are several minutes old because I haven't had much time to look through them yet. And yes, I am looking out my window. I've got another truck backing in. I'm live from the road. I've got a truck backing in next to me. I want to make sure he doesn't actually hit me. And Cleveland swap in a Pinto, or will a Boss 302 do? You know what, DJ Play Nice? I would have accepted either. I had a cousin that somehow or another got a Buick V6 that was shoehorned into an old Opel. And that thing was just a absolute rat rod. I have another cousin that had a 289 in a Ford Pinto. Damn thing would it would pull off a 10.9 quarter. That was a rocket ship. Never did find the Pinto that I wanted. So let's see here. DJ Play Nice again said, I recall there being a thing about nearly all cash having trace amounts of something. Yeah. Mark Hookham says, a dog can detect a teaspoon of sugar in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. I'd never heard that one. I think I'm pretty close to caught up. We could go on about the Ford Pintos and power to weight ratios and engine combinations, and hell, I'll even get into camshafts, but we're a little off topic.
So will I.
So
I've got a bit of a. Go ahead, Alex. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, Kat, you've been silent. It's your turn.
Oh no, it's okay because I was going to take this into rougher territory and ask, with the fourth and being secure in your houses, warrantless entry versus warrants, and we all know ICE just continues to be in the news. So tying it to current events, how does that work exactly? Let's say, hypothetically, they came here. We're all legal. We're citizens. And they have no warrant, because that's the thing you keep hearing about is they don't have a warrant. So what are the rules actually on warrant versus the warrantless entry as it ties into the Fourth Amendment?
So there are, the general rule is that if they are going to search or seize property, they have to have a warrant that's supported by probable cause and by oath or affirmation from generally a police officer who is seeking to conduct the search or the seizure. There are a number of exceptions to the warrant requirement that are primarily generated by case law. And those warrant the exceptions may vary state to state based on state law and state case law. But in any state, you're at least going to be limited by the Fourth Amendment. Okay, that's the floor on your rights. Many states have more protection than the Fourth Amendment, but they have to have at least as much protection as the Fourth Amendment. And so warrantless searches, no-knock raids, for instance, have been a hot topic. Some of those are pursuant to warrants still, but no-knock warrants. But warrantless searches have to be justified by some, typically what's called an exigent circumstance, where they think if we don't enter right now, this person or some evidence may be destroyed. So there are some situations where they can enter based on those exigent circumstances, but they have to be able to articulate those, and they have to be reasonably articulated based on the totality of the circumstances. And a judge has to sign off on those. If they don't, and they're not able to articulate that, then either the person or the evidence that's seized can be suppressed later through some court proceeding. Now, in the context of ICE, that's different than what we typically talk about in terms of warrantless searches, because what they're saying is these are administrative warrants. These are not judicial. Yes. These are not judicial warrants, where there has to be some affidavit that's signed by oath or affirmation, submitted to a neutral magistrate that's reviewed the warrant and signed off on it. They're saying that we can submit this to an administrative judge, and who is not elected, who is not a judge, a constitutional judge. They're a judge through an administrative agency, and they are generally another member of the executive branch. So you essentially have a member of the executive branch via ICE or the Department of Homeland Security seeking a warrant from another member of the executive branch. And so you're basically saying, I want a warrant signed by my own team member. And so there's that to me, and this is my personal opinion, I think violates the separation of powers, violates the right to due process, and frankly, warrants are extremely easy to get. They're essentially rubber stamps. So to say that the extra step of getting a judicial warrant is too much of a burden and would stop immigration enforcement, I think way overstates the problem. And so I think that the proper procedure, the constitutionally prescribed procedure, is to get a warrant from a judicial officer, not an administrative judge.
Yeah, because that's the whole reason that the system is set up that way. All the enforcement agencies are members of executive branch of government at the various levels, and the check on their actions is supposed to be coming from one of the other branches.
Yeah, that's right. And if the person is here illegally, their affidavit would say, we believe that this person is here illegally and we need a search warrant or an arrest warrant to detain this person or enter their home. And a judge would sign off on that very quickly. But the problem is that there's no way to challenge that if they get the warrant unlawfully, there's not really a mechanism for them to challenge the warrant, because it's not from a judicial officer, it's from an administrative procedure.
And that makes sense. So I guess my follow-up to that would be, what can the average person do if any member of law enforcement or claiming to be a member of some branch of law enforcement shows up at their door? At what point do you have to let them in no matter what? And beyond just show me your warrant, because quite frankly, anyone can have something fake. So what should people actually be looking for? Do they have the legal right to ask for some form of badge number or ID, or does that only apply to local cops, state, level stuff.
No, you can ask for ID badge number. I think it's reasonable to ask for a warrant because you don't. We talked about this in episode 4 when we were talking about vehicles. I think it's sort of the same principle. You don't want to consent because if you consent to the entry of your home, you can't challenge the search or the seizure later based on an improper warrant or an improper entry into your home. So never consent. But if they say we're coming in anyway at the point of a gun, there's not much you can do. And you just have to address the issue later through the legal process. And if they enter your home unlawfully, then the remedy is the suppression of the evidence. Unfortunately, if you're arrested, you can't undo your arrest, but you might be able to pursue some civil remedy based on an unreasonable law enforcement action.
And this is going to seem super left field, but hand to God, this crossed my mind like a week ago with all the stuff going on in the media. If someone tried to come into the house here, with or without a warrant, it doesn't matter, my dogs would do bad things. Is it within your legal rights to say, let me go lock up my dogs, or is that considered a failure to comply?
I think it's reasonable to ask to lock up your dogs because you're actually trying to cooperate by doing that.
Yeah, but they don't know that. They could say, well, she could be going for a gun. Seriously.
They don't. And if they say no, you need to follow their order. But it's reasonable to ask to do that.
And that's why ATF shoots dogs.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I've wondered about that because I've got 2 Danes and they're actually not the scary ones in the house, but they look it. So
yeah. I mean, anytime that I've had to deal with law enforcement at my house, I've had neighbors who called animal control, or we had an incident a couple of years back where I had to report something that had happened. When they show up at the door to come talk to us, I step outside. Don't invite them into the house. Let me grab my jacket and we'll step outside and we will talk out there just to try and stay clear of any notion that I've consented to to any kind of search in my house. Not that I'm hiding anything, but just I feel that's the prudent thing to do is to minimize the opportunity for things to go sideways.
Yeah.
Oh no, you're right. And a funny anecdote for that. A few years. Grace is about to graduate college, so 4 or 5 years ago, one of the local cops showed up, and this is a very small Texas town. We're fancy because we have 2 deputies and a sheriff. I mean, it's a very small town. So one of them showed up, and I knew him. We're not friends, but I knew him, and they quite literally had never been to the house before. And I'm thinking, okay, what's wrong? So of course I went out on the porch. I'm thinking, you're not coming in. I'll step out on the porch. Dude was bringing Grace's freaking Letterman jacket over because the senior deliveries had come and they had the freaking cops knocking on people's doors. That was so not cool. So that's like a funnier one, but
that's a very small town thing.
It is. It about gave me a freaking stroke, and I live here. So and something that people, when we're kids, we're always taught that any member of law enforcement, any first responder is your buddy. How many of us here were told when you were little, if you get lost or something's wrong, find someone in uniform? And I did not teach that to Grace, and I'm not teaching that to Bo, because it's just not, everyone's human and people forget that. So that means not everyone's good. Which sucks, but it's reality. And the same goes for the possible ethics and morals of the people that may have gotten the warrant or not gotten a warrant or just be trying to bluff their way in the house.
Yeah.
So it really helps to know your rights, even when it's the more boring amendments.
Right.
It's important.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's not as, and there are many great law enforcement officers. I'm not a cop hater by any stretch, but it's not a safe assumption to assume that they are your friend. An example I give to people all the time is when a when a police car pulls up behind you on the highway, what is your first thought? You get anxiety, like they're going to try to catch you doing something, even though you're not doing anything wrong. Your thought is not, oh, I'm glad they're there, I feel safer now. Right? So your intuition is that the assumption is not that they're your friend, right? But people, for whatever reason, through indoctrination or whatever reason, think that they're always their friend, and that's just not true. Especially, and this is my perception, this is just me talking, as you get higher and higher up the law enforcement chain. So I think the more local the law enforcement, the more likely they are to be your friend. The more distant they are, the less likely they are to be your friend.
I'm going to say this. I've driven through enough small towns, Alex. If you are not a local and you're driving through a small town, law enforcement is not your friend.
That's true. If you're a local, that's right. That's a good caveat.
Yeah, there's some notorious speed traps, especially through parts of Texas on the way out to where Kat lives.
Yeah. Well, if it's okay, I want to wrap up with a few thoughts on civil asset forfeiture.
Okay.
Because I have a few more things I'd like to mention.
Sure.
First is, this is just an interesting statistic. In most years, and I can't verify this for every year, but in most years, more money in terms of value or property is taken from American citizens through civil asset forfeiture than it is through robbery or burglary. Okay, so that gives you some sense of the scale of this operation. Okay, and some of it may be justifiably so, but lots of it not so, not justifiably so. So that's one thing to keep in mind here. The next thing I want to mention is, why is this problematic? And we talked about this a little bit already, but our property is not something other than us. It's an extension of us. It's an extension of our life's work, of our labor, of our endeavors, right? It's something that we've purchased, that we own, that is an extension of us. Our property is ours. And so to treat it like it's something other than us is, I think, a philosophical error. And I think it's part of the contradiction of this whole concept of civil asset forfeiture, is that we can somehow take your property and that does not implicate your personal property rights. Because the moral foundation of our legal framework is that we are self-owners. That is, we have a right to self-ownership of ourselves and our own bodies. And that includes the fruits of our labor, which is our property, right? So from a philosophical standpoint, disregarding the constitutional framework, I think that civil asset forfeiture is nonsensical. So what can be done to fix this is the last thing I want to touch on. And there are some reform efforts being made, many at the state level. One is that you could simply require a conviction before seizing or before permanently forfeiting the person's property. They might seize it, take it, hold it while the criminal case is pending, and then only after there's a conviction, go finalize the forfeiture proceeding. That would be, I think, one solution.
Mm-hmm.
The other is, if you want to maintain it as a civil proceeding, you could raise the burden of proof, raise the standard of evidence, make it clear and convincing, make it some higher level of proof where they actually have to show up to a hearing. There's not this burden shift, and they have to prove we had some lawful authority to take that property based on more than probable cause. Another is to provide some clarity on this fee shifting provision that's already in existence, but where there are still some loopholes. Like I mentioned earlier, they can simply dismiss the case, and then some courts have said that doesn't mean that the person substantially prevailed, and therefore they're not entitled to attorney fees. I think fixing some of those provisions would help stem the abuse of this civil asset forfeiture practice. So those are just some ideas to help reform this practice. I don't think that necessarily it has to be abolished if there are these reforms where you do get due process. They do have to provide some substantial evidence and meet a threshold of evidence more than just probable cause, and where there's some judicial review of the process without the person having to expend extensive attorney fees just to get their property back. So those are kind of my closing thoughts on the subject. And if there are other questions, I'm happy to entertain those.
I mean, I've heard the argument made many times that if there is no right to property, there is no right to life.
That's right. Yeah.
And yeah, I'm wholly in agreement with you there. That artificial division of your property versus yourself is nonsensical, and I don't think does fall within the constitutional framework.
That's right. I agree.
Well, I think we've covered that part pretty well. Anything else we need to go into today with Alex, guys?
No, I think he covered that really well. Much more concise than we usually cover things.
Oh, I appreciate that. This is a subject that I care a lot about, so much so that it was episode 8 of the Forge of Freedom. I covered it very early after I started the podcast, and I think it's, like I said, it's a subject that not very many people know much about, and I'm trying to make more people aware about it, because I don't think there will be any change to the abusive process or the abusive use of this process until more people know about it and are frankly upset about it.
Well, and honestly, I don't, other than people like ourselves who are strongly focused on individual freedoms, it doesn't affect a lot of people unless they get struck by it.
Yeah.
So the general public really, I don't think, knows that much about it, simply because they don't know anybody that has had, $6,000 taken from them at a traffic stop.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of it. But as you know, just because something doesn't affect you, I mean, for instance, the fact that Dick Heller couldn't carry a firearm in Washington, D.C. had no effect on me directly.
Correct.
Right. But the practice, that prohibition, that sort of mentality that we can disregard the Second Amendment has a pervasive effect on society. And I think that the more people sort of entertain or accept these sorts of abusive practices, the more prevalent they become, and eventually they will impact you. So you need to fight against them before the fire spreads to your own backyard. So that's really the message I think that people need to hear.
Yeah, never give your government power that you would not be comfortable with them having directly over you. You may be thinking, well, this will only be used against whoever the bad guy is in your mind, but you can expect that is going to get turned against you and people like you at some point. So be very, very careful in ceding power to government.
I would
Totally
absolutely
agree
with that. Well, we are about 9 minutes away from being online for an hour. Do we want to make a left turn here, guys? I've got one kind of in mind. I cannot remember if we've done it yet or not, but
Go for it.
Now that I'm back in the seat of a truck and driving for a living again, I get teased every once in a while when I go in to get my coffee. As a truck driver, when you fill your tank, which I do about every other day, you fill your diesel tanks, you're spending $900 give or take on fuel. They'll give you a cup of coffee. When I go in to get my cup of coffee, I put a lot of artificial sweetener in my coffee, and I like I'm going to call it frou-frou coffee creamers. And it doesn't make me any less of a man, doesn't make me any less of a person, because I happen to like French vanilla coffee creamer.
Hey, you know what? We're all allowed to have our childish indulgences.
Not in coffee. Coffee is supposed to be black, and that's it. I will die on this hill.
No. Coffee is too bitter to be drank without some leavening. Let's put it that way.
It's supposed to be. You're not supposed to love it. You have to learn to deal with it. And then eventually you like it.
Paul kind of has a point on most gas station coffee. I may be a bit of a coffee snob, but there is coffee that I make myself. I have no problem drinking black, and there is coffee that you pick up out of a carafe that's been sitting there on the hot plate for God knows how many hours. That it almost tastes like stomach acid.
I agree with that. A good coffee does not need any dressing, but bad coffee sometimes does, if you're desperate for coffee.
Coffee absolutely has a very short lifespan. From the time it's finished brewing, you've got about 15 minutes to get it in your cup. After that, it gets too bitter.
It's supposed to be bitter, though.
Oh, Mark's got it right. And this is the problem with Starbucks coffee is they over roast all their beans.
Well, that, and it's like $9 a cup now for a venti. So
yeah, I haven't bought coffee anywhere but one local gas station chain in a long time. Fill up the 30 ounce vacuum tumbler at the beginning of the day, and there you go. I have my pot of coffee to last me the first 3 hours of the day.
Love's isn't too bad, because I stop at Love's a lot driving cross country, like going to see, Tom and Diane and stuff up north. I look for Love's and try to avoid the weird places. So
Love's, that's where I do my fueling, is at Love's Travel. That's where I'm at right now, is a Love's Travel Center. And shout out to Love's, because they've got pretty decent internet. At least I think they do. I haven't dropped out yet. But even their coffee, if you can catch coffee that's been sitting there 2-3 hours, just because they've got a lot of stuff to do. Sometimes they're not right on top of the coffee.
Paul, why do you not have a portable Keurig in your truck?
I do.
Huh? Good Lord.
I have to pay for that coffee.
It's the principle of the thing. I got it. Okay.
A lot of the Love's stations have those machines that grind the coffee on the spot now.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, those are nice. I like those.
Yeah.
And Brian, this is the coffee cup I use. It's a 40 ouncer.
Yeah, I've got an Arctic tumbler I've been using for like 15 years now.
Sometime we'll have to make our left turn about mugs and thermoses, because
I'm sure you have opinions on this, Kat.
Do we wash our coffee mugs, or do we just rinse them out?
Just rinse.
Thank you. We just rinse. The
Agreed.
disease can take me. It's fine. If that's how I die, so be it. I'm good with that.
I have a smaller tumbler that goes in my Keurig in the truck, because one 40-ounce coffee does not last me the whole day.
No.
And I get basically one free cup of coffee every other day, like I said, because I fuel the truck every other day. The coffee mug that I have, the tumbler that I have that goes in the Keurig, it's actually the cheap Walmart version thereof. That never gets washed. I brew in that, then I pour it in my bigger cup, and that I'll wipe it out, but I never ever wash it. It's just like seasoning an old cast iron pan.
Seasoning.
Yeah, if it gets used for nothing but coffee, then you rinse it.
So before we call it, I have a question that's super, super important, Paul.
Uh-oh.
So when you're filling up with diesel, no, I'm actually not entirely kidding about this. So when you're filling up with diesel and you go in for your free cup of coffee, do you scream, "I am a trucker," as you go inside to the coffee machine?
No.
Do you grab the coffee and flip them off as you walk by and say, I'm a trucker? How does this
No.
work? That's boring.
There's you get a loyalty card for every place that sells truck fuel offers loyalty cards, and that's how they distribute their free coffee.
Oh, okay.
I use the loyalty card when I fill the truck. I pull the truck forward, grab my coffee cup, go in, get my coffee, swipe the loyalty card that I just used for fueling the truck. I get my free coffee.
I'm kind of disappointed. I was hoping for more something. That's really anticlimactic, but okay.
No, Paul's too nice to be pulling that kind of stuff anymore. I mean,
That's
20 years ago, it could have been a different story.
I'm going to push it closer to 35 years ago, but
Okay, I won't say what I was doing 35 years ago.
Brian, 35 years ago, you were in junior high school.
I was in elementary school. I was 8.
Yeah, me too. Me too. That would be elementary.
Oh, geez.
All right, well, guys, I think we've got this one in the bag. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna hit the bunk because I've got to be rolling very early in the morning. Live viewers, thank you for watching us live. Please hit the like button. Please make sure you're subscribed. For people who listen to this on podcast, thank you again. Thank you for listening. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast and email us if you have any comments. It is trpp1776@yahoo.com to email us your comments. Once we get a comment, we'll put it on the next show. Thanks again. That's going to do it for us, folks. We'll see you next time.
All right. Have a good night, y'all.